In the peaceful village of Umuzi, where the air smelled of roasted corn and the wind sang softly through the tall palm trees, there lived a young girl named CHINAZA. She was known by everyone for her bright smile and curious heart. From sunrise to sunset, CHINAZA loved to explore the world around her. She would walk along the dusty roads barefoot, humming songs her grandmother had taught her. The birds in the trees seemed to answer her melodies, and she often spoke to them as if they were her friends. She liked to collect shiny stones, colorful leaves, and tiny feathers that fell from the sky. Every day for CHINAZA was an adventure waiting to happen. Umuzi was a small and beautiful village. The houses were made of red clay and had roofs of palm leaves. In the mornings, the smell of firewood filled the air as mothers cooked porridge and children ran to the stream to fetch water. Everyone knew one another, and people lived in peace. Yet there was one part of the village that few dared to go near, the thick forest at the edge of Umuzi. Hidden deep inside that forest was a small hut, and it belonged to an old woman named Mama Adana. Many villagers whispered about Mama Adana. Some said she had strange powers. Others said she could talk to the spirits of the trees. Children were told never to go near her hut. "Stay away from that place," the elders would say. "The old woman brings bad luck." The adults would lower their voices whenever her name was mentioned, and the children would shiver, imagining dark magic and scary shadows. But CHINAZA did not believe those stories completely. She had seen Mama Adana once before, from a distance, at the market. The old woman had wrinkled skin like folded paper, and her gray hair was tied in a simple scarf. She walked slowly, carrying a small basket of herbs. No one spoke to her, and she bought her things quietly before disappearing down the road again. There was something gentle about her face, CHINAZA thought. She did not look like someone who would harm anyone. That evening, CHINAZA sat outside her grandmother's hut, watching the orange glow of the setting sun spread across the sky. The air was calm, and the voices of the crickets filled the silence. Her grandmother, Mama Kalechi, sat beside her, spinning cotton and humming an old song. "Grandma," CHINAZA said softly, "why does everyone fear Mama Adana?" Her grandmother paused, her hands stopping mid-spin. "People fear what they don't understand, my child," she said slowly. "Long ago, Mama Adana was the village healer. She knew the language of herbs and the secrets of the forest. But after some time, people began to call her names. They said her medicine was witchcraft. So she left and never came back." CHINAZA's eyes widened. "So she is not a bad person?" she asked. Her grandmother sighed. "I do not know any more. No one has spoken to her for many years. But she has never hurt anyone either." That night, as CHINAZA lay on her mat, she couldn't stop thinking about the old woman. She imagined what her hut looked like. Did she live there all alone? Did she have a garden full of strange plants? Did she ever feel lonely? The questions danced in her mind like fireflies. She wanted to know the truth for herself. The next morning, after the rooster crowed and the sun painted the sky with pink and gold, CHINAZA decided to walk toward the forest. She carried a small basket and pretended she was going to pick wild fruits. Her grandmother was busy grinding pepper, so she did not notice when CHINAZA slipped away. The path to the forest was narrow and lined with tall grass. Butterflies fluttered in the air, and the smell of flowers followed her. She could hear the hum of bees and the distant call of a woodpecker. As she reached the forest edge, she felt a shiver of excitement. The trees stood tall like giants, their branches weaving together to form a roof of green. Light filtered through the leaves, making tiny golden circles on the ground. It was quiet except for the soft rustling of the wind. CHINAZA stepped carefully, her heart beating fast. Every sound made her turn her head, the crunch of dry leaves, the buzz of insects, the distant hoot of an owl. But she kept walking, curious and brave. She had not gone far when she saw a small clearing ahead. Smoke was rising gently from a chimney. Her eyes widened. There it was, Mama Adana's hut. It was smaller than she imagined, made of mud walls and a roof covered with palm branches. Outside, there were clay pots, herbs hanging to dry, and a small wooden chair. A black cat sat near the doorway, its eyes bright and calm. CHINAZA stood behind a tree, watching quietly. She saw the door open slowly, and Mama Adana stepped out. The old woman moved carefully, leaning on a stick. She wore a simple wrapper and a faded blue blouse. Her face looked kind, not scary at all. She knelt beside her garden patch and began watering the plants. CHINAZA watched her for a while, wondering how someone so gentle could be feared by the whole village. Suddenly, a bird flew down and landed near Mama Adana's feet. The old woman smiled and spoke softly to it. CHINAZA couldn't hear what she said, but the bird didn't fly away. It just hopped closer as if it understood her words. CHINAZA gasped softly. She didn't know if it was magic or kindness, but it was beautiful. The old woman turned her head slightly, and CHINAZA quickly hid behind the tree. Her heart raced. She didn't know if she should run away or step forward and greet her. She peeked again, and Mama Adana was now sitting on her chair, shelling groundnuts and humming a quiet tune. The sound reminded CHINAZA of her grandmother's lullabies. She wanted to say hello, but her courage trembled inside her chest. She took a deep breath and whispered to herself, "I'm not afraid." She stepped out from behind the tree, her feet crunching on dry leaves. The cat looked up, and Mama Adana raised her eyes slowly. For a moment, they both stared at each other. The old woman's gaze was calm, not angry. She didn't shout or wave her stick. Instead, she smiled gently. "Come here, my child," she said in a soft voice. "You have nothing to fear." CHINAZA froze for a second, her heart pounding. Then she took a small step forward. The old woman's smile grew wider. The sunlight touched her silver hair, making it shine like threads of light. CHINAZA felt something warm inside her, a feeling she couldn't explain. Maybe this was not a scary woman at all. Maybe she was just lonely. Before CHINAZA could say anything, the wind rustled through the trees, and the leaves swirled around them like tiny dancers. It felt as if the forest itself was whispering a welcome. CHINAZA looked up at the tall trees and smiled. She realized that the truth was not always what people said, it was something one had to see with their own eyes. And in that quiet moment, standing before the woman everyone feared, CHINAZA took her first step into a story she would never forget. The sun rose slowly over the quiet village of Umuzi. The roosters crowed, and women began sweeping the red earth in front of their homes. The smell of cooking filled the air as smoke curled up from small clay stoves. Inside a neat little hut near the stream, CHINAZA's grandmother, Mama Kalechi, was getting ready for the day. She wore her blue wrapper and reached for her favorite gold pendant that she always tied around her neck. But when she looked at the small clay bowl where she kept it, her eyes widened. The pendant was gone. Her heart jumped. That pendant was more than just jewelry. It was a family treasure passed down from her own mother. It was small and round, with a smooth golden surface that shone even in the dim light. Mama Kalechi had worn it since she was a young woman. She believed it brought peace to the home and kept the family safe. Now, it was missing. She searched the mat, looked under her stool, and even checked the cooking area. Where could it have gone?" she murmured, her voice full of worry. CHINAZA, who was outside feeding the chickens, heard her grandmother's troubled voice and ran inside. "What happened, Grandma?" she asked. "My pendant, my golden pendant, it's gone," Mama Kalechi said. "I wore it yesterday when I went to the market. I must have dropped it somewhere." CHINAZA's eyes widened. She knew how much her grandmother loved that pendant. "Don't worry, Grandma," she said quickly. "I will help you find it." Mama Kalechi smiled weakly. "My child, that forest path is long. Be careful if you go searching. The pendant may be near the stream or on the road." CHINAZA nodded. She packed a small basket with water and some roasted corn and tied a scarf around her hair. Her grandmother wanted to go with her, but she was too old to walk far. So CHINAZA promised to return before sunset. She stepped out into the morning light. The sun was warm but gentle, and the wind brushed softly against her cheeks. The road to the stream was covered with fresh footprints from women fetching water. CHINAZA followed the path, her eyes scanning the ground for any sign of gold. She walked slowly, turning over small stones and dried leaves. When she reached the stream, she bent down to look near the water's edge. The stream was clear, and she could see tiny fish swimming between the rocks. She smiled at them, then looked carefully around. But there was no pendant. She checked the nearby bushes and even the roots of a fallen tree. Nothing. CHINAZA sat on a flat rock to rest for a moment. She took a sip of water and thought hard. If her grandmother had lost the pendant while returning from the market, maybe it had fallen on the path near the forest. The thought made her pause. The forest. The place everyone warned her not to go near. She looked at the line of trees in the distance. They stood tall and dark, their shadows stretching across the ground. The villagers always said strange things about the forest, that it was filled with spirits, that Mama Adana, the old woman who lived there, cast spells and spoke to animals. But CHINAZA didn't believe those tales anymore. She remembered the kind face she had seen once from afar. Still, she felt a little nervous. For a while, she sat quietly, listening to the sound of the running water. Then she made up her mind. If the pendant is near the forest, I must find it, she said softly. Grandma will be so happy. She stood up, dusted her wrapper, and began walking toward the trees. The air grew cooler as she got closer, and the sound of the village faded away behind her. The forest smelled of wet earth and flowers. Birds chirped high above her, and the leaves whispered gently in the breeze. CHINAZA walked slowly, careful not to step on thorns or slippery stones. Her eyes searched the ground, looking for a glimpse of gold. After a while, she reached a small clearing. A narrow trail led deeper into the forest. She hesitated, remembering the stories. Mama Adana lives somewhere in here, she whispered. Maybe I shouldn't go too far. But then she saw something that made her stop, a thin line of smoke rising in the distance. Her heart skipped a beat. The smoke was coming from a small hut. She took a deep breath. It must be Mama Adana's home. Part of her wanted to run back, but her curiosity was stronger than her fear. Maybe she has seen the pendant, CHINAZA thought. Maybe she can help. She walked carefully along the trail, pushing aside the tall grass. The smell of smoke grew stronger, and soon she could see the hut clearly. It was small, with walls made of mud and a roof covered in palm leaves. A few clay pots sat outside, and colorful herbs hung from strings above the doorway. It looked quiet and peaceful, not frightening at all. CHINAZA stepped closer. Her heart thumped loudly. She was about to call out when she heard a gentle humming sound. It came from inside the hut. The voice was soft and sweet, singing a tune that sounded like an old village song. CHINAZA listened quietly, and for some reason, it made her feel calm. She looked around again. There were flowers growing near the hut, bright yellow ones with petals like the sun. Beside them was a small wooden chair, and on it sat a woven basket filled with fruits. Everything looked tidy. She noticed a line of footprints leading from the hut to the stream. Maybe Mama Adana had been there earlier. Suddenly, something shiny caught her eye. It was lying near a large stone not far from the hut. CHINAZA gasped and ran toward it. The sunlight glinted off a round golden shape. It was the pendant. Her grandmother's pendant. She knelt down, picked it up carefully, and held it in her hands. The gold felt warm against her skin. She smiled brightly, her heart full of joy. But just then, she heard a soft voice behind her. "My dear, are you looking for something?" CHINAZA froze. Slowly, she turned around. Standing in the doorway of the hut was Mama Adana. She looked exactly as CHINAZA remembered, gray hair, gentle eyes, and a kind face. She held a wooden spoon in her hand and wore a faded wrapper. There was no anger or fear in her eyes, only curiosity. CHINAZA swallowed hard but didn't run. I was looking for my grandmother's pendant," she said quietly. "It must have fallen when she went to the market." Mama Adana smiled softly. "Ah, yes," she said. "I found it this morning near the riverbank. I thought it belonged to someone from the village. I planned to return it tomorrow." CHINAZA's eyes widened. "You found it?" The old woman nodded and walked closer, her step slow but steady. "Yes, my child. I am glad you came. I was just thinking about how to give it back." CHINAZA smiled shyly. "Thank you, Mama. My grandmother will be so happy. She was very worried." Mama Adana chuckled gently. "You have a kind heart, little one. Not many from the village visit me anymore." She pointed to a stool near the doorway. "Would you like some water before you go? You must be tired from walking." CHINAZA hesitated for a moment, then nodded. She followed the old woman into the hut. Inside, it smelled of herbs and fresh bread. The walls were decorated with dried plants, and a clay pot sat over a small fire. Mama Adana poured her some water and gave her a small piece of bread. As they sat together, CHINAZA realized how wrong the villagers had been. Mama Adana wasn't scary at all. She was kind, gentle, and wise. They talked for a while about the forest, the village, and the flowers that grew near the stream. When it was time to go, Mama Adana walked her to the edge of the forest. CHINAZA stood at the edge of the small clearing, her heart beating fast. The hut before her looked quiet and calm, with smoke slowly curling up from the little chimney. She could hear the soft humming of a woman's voice coming from inside. The air smelled of herbs and fresh firewood, and birds sang gently in the trees above. For a moment, she wondered if she should really go closer. The stories about the old woman came rushing back to her mind, but she remembered the smile she had seen on Mama Adana's face the last time she saw her from afar. That memory gave her courage. She took a deep breath and walked toward the hut. Her sandals made a faint sound on the soft earth, and the black cat near the door lifted its head to watch her. It didn't hiss or move away, it just blinked slowly, as if it already knew her. CHINAZA stopped in front of the door and hesitated. She could feel her palms sweating. She raised her hand and knocked softly. For a few seconds, there was silence. Then the door opened, and the old woman stood there, her eyes gentle and her smile kind. "Ah," Mama Adana said softly, "you must be the little girl from the village." Her voice was calm and smooth, like a quiet song. CHINAZA felt her fear melt away. She bowed her head slightly and said, "Good morning, Mama." "Good morning, my child," the old woman replied. "You have come far. Come in, don't stand outside in the sun." CHINAZA hesitated for a moment, but then she stepped inside. The hut was small but warm and welcoming. There was a small fire burning in one corner, and the smell of herbs filled the air. Dried flowers hung from the roof, and baskets of roots, fruits, and leaves lined the walls. A clay pot sat bubbling gently over the fire. Everything looked neat and peaceful. As CHINAZA's eyes moved around the room, she suddenly noticed something shiny on a small wooden table near the window. Her heart jumped. It was the pendant. The golden circle gleamed in the sunlight that filtered through the cracks in the wall. She turned quickly to Mama Adana. "That's my grandmother's pendant," she said, pointing to it. "We have been looking everywhere for it." Mama Adana looked at the pendant and smiled. "Ah, so it belongs to your grandmother." "I thought so," she said kindly. "I found it near the river early this morning. I plan to take it to the village market tomorrow, in case someone came looking for it." CHINAZA's face lit up with relief. "Thank you, Mama. My grandmother has been so worried. That pendant is very special to her." The old woman nodded. "Yes, I can tell. It has a kind spirit. Here, take it." She picked up the pendant carefully and placed it in CHINAZA's hands. "It must be kept safe." CHINAZA looked down at it, her heart full of happiness. "Thank you so much," she said softly. "Grandma will be so happy when I bring it back." Mama Adana smiled warmly. "You are a good child to come all the way here. Many from the village fear me. They think I am a witch." CHINAZA frowned. "I don't think you are a witch," she said honestly. "You don't look scary at all. Your home is beautiful, and you are kind." The old woman chuckled, the sound soft and gentle. "Ah, my dear, people often fear what they do not understand. Long ago, I was the healer of Umuzi. I used to treat people when they were sick and help the mothers when babies were born. But one day, someone became ill after eating the wrong herbs, and they blamed me. Since then, people have avoided me." She looked out the small window, her eyes sad but calm. "I decided to live quietly here, close to the forest that has always been my friend." CHINAZA listened carefully. She could see the sadness in Mama Adana's eyes, but there was also peace in her face. "That's not fair," CHINAZA said softly. "You were only trying to help." Mama Adana nodded. "Life is sometimes unfair, my child. But the forest never turns its back on anyone. It teaches me patience." She looked at CHINAZA and smiled again. "Would you like some tea? It is made from mint and lemon leaves. It helps calm the heart." CHINAZA smiled shyly and nodded. "Yes, please." The old woman poured the tea into a small cup and handed it to her. The steam rose gently, and the smell was sweet and fresh. CHINAZA took a sip. It was warm and soothing, and she felt safe. "Do you come to the forest often?" Mama Adana asked. "No," CHINAZA said. "People in the village say it is dangerous. But I like the trees. They are quiet and beautiful. I like to listen to the birds." Mama Adana nodded. "The forest speaks if you listen carefully. It tells stories of old times, of rain, wind, and life. Everything here has a voice, my child. Even the smallest leaf." CHINAZA smiled. "I believe that. My grandmother says I have a curious heart." The old woman chuckled. "That is a gift. Curiosity brings learning. It makes the world bigger." For a while, they sat together in silence, listening to the sound of the forest outside, the rustle of leaves, the chirping of crickets, and the soft crackle of the fire. CHINAZA felt peaceful. She had never imagined the forest could feel so safe. She realized now that the stories told in the village were wrong. Mama Adana was no witch. She was just a lonely old woman with a kind heart and deep wisdom. When she finished her tea, CHINAZA stood up. "I should go home now before Grandma starts to worry," she said. Mama Adana nodded. "Of course, my dear. But before you go, take this." She reached into a small basket and pulled out a tiny bundle of dried herbs tied with string. "Give this to your grandmother. She can put it in hot water to make tea when she feels tired. It will help her sleep well." CHINAZA took it carefully. "Thank you, Mama. I will tell her it's from you." The old woman smiled again. "Do that. And tell her that Mama Adana still remembers the days of kindness." CHINAZA nodded. She turned to leave, but before she stepped outside, she looked back at the old woman. "Mama Adana," she said softly, "can I visit you again?" The old woman's face brightened. "Of course, my dear. You will always be welcome here." CHINAZA smiled. "I will come again soon. Maybe I can help you with your garden." Mama Adana's eyes sparkled. "That would make me very happy." Outside, the forest was glowing with golden light. The sun was beginning to set, and the air was cool. The black cat followed CHINAZA to the path and watched her for a moment before turning back toward the hut. CHINAZA walked slowly, holding the pendant in one hand and the little bundle of herbs in the other. As she walked, she thought about what Mama Adana had said. People feared what they didn't understand. Maybe it was time for someone to change that. She would tell her grandmother the truth, and maybe, little by little, the village would learn that kindness could live even in the quiet corners of the forest. When CHINAZA reached the edge of the village, she turned once more to look at the forest. The trees looked softer now, their shadows long but gentle. She smiled and whispered, "Thank you, Mama Adana." Then she ran home, her heart light, her mind full of wonder, and her spirit full of courage. She could already imagine the joy on her grandmother's face when she saw the golden pendant again. And deep inside her, CHINAZA knew this was not the end of her story with the old woman. It was only the beginning of a beautiful friendship that would change both their lives. CHINAZA sat quietly on the small wooden stool inside Mama Adana's hut. The soft glow of the fire filled the room, making the clay walls shine like gold. Outside, the forest whispered gently, and the air smelled of herbs and fresh rain. The old woman moved slowly around the hut, pouring warm tea into 2 cups. Her hands trembled slightly, but her smile never faded. She handed 1 cup to CHINAZA and said softly, "Drink, my dear. It will warm your heart." CHINAZA took a small sip. The tea tasted sweet and minty, and the warmth spread through her chest. She looked around the hut again. Everything was simple but beautiful. There were clay pots, hanging herbs, wooden spoons, and little baskets filled with dried leaves and roots. On one wall, she saw drawings made from charcoal, pictures of flowers, trees, and animals. It was clear that Mama Adana loved nature deeply. The old woman sat down across from her and looked into the fire. "It has been a long time since anyone from the village came to visit me," she said quietly. "You are a brave child." CHINAZA smiled shyly. "I wanted to thank you for finding my grandmother's pendant," she said. "And I wanted to see who you really are. People in the village say things. They say you are a witch." Mama Adana laughed softly, not angrily, but with sadness hidden in her voice. "Ah, yes," she said. "I have heard those words for many years. It no longer hurts as it once did. People fear what they do not understand." She looked at CHINAZA with kind eyes. "Would you like to hear the truth?" CHINAZA nodded quickly. "Yes, Mama. Please tell me." The old woman leaned back in her chair and sighed. "A long time ago, when I was young, I lived in the heart of Umuzi village. My name was known by everyone, but not because of fear. I was the village healer. I learned about plants and their powers from my mother and grandmother. I helped women give birth to their babies, I healed children with fevers, and I treated old men with aching bones. The people used to call me Mama of Healing. I was happy then." CHINAZA listened with wide eyes. She had never heard this story before. She could almost imagine the younger Mama Adana walking through the village, carrying baskets of herbs and smiling as she greeted people. "One year," the old woman continued, "a terrible sickness came to the village. It spread quickly, and many people became weak. I worked day and night, trying to make medicine from roots and leaves. I saved many, but not all. Some families lost their loved ones, and they were angry. They began to whisper that my medicine had brought the sickness, not healed it. The whispers grew louder, and soon, people stopped coming to me. They called me a witch. Some even threw stones at my door." CHINAZA gasped. "That's terrible," she said softly. "You were trying to help them." Mama Adana nodded slowly. "Yes, my child. But fear is a strong thing. It can make good people blind. I left the village and came to live here in the forest, where it is quiet and peaceful. The forest became my friend. The trees do not judge, and the river does not whisper lies. Here, I can still help, even if it's only the animals and the plants that need me." CHINAZA felt a deep sadness in her heart. "Didn't anyone ever try to visit you?" The old woman shook her head. "No one. At first, a few children would come to look at my herbs or listen to my stories, but their parents would soon call them back. They were told that I was dangerous." She smiled faintly. "It is strange, isn't it? How quickly love can turn to fear." CHINAZA looked down at her cup, thinking about her own grandmother. Mama Kalechi had never said bad things about Mama Adana, but she had always warned her to stay away. Now she understood why. The stories had changed over the years, twisting the truth into something dark. "Mama," CHINAZA said softly, "you are not a witch. You are kind and wise. You helped my grandmother and many others. I don't understand why they cannot see that." Mama Adana smiled. "Thank you, my dear. You have a good heart. But sometimes, people do not see what is in front of them. They believe the stories they are told, not the truth that lives quietly beside them." CHINAZA sat silently for a while, listening to the sound of the fire crackling. She felt both sad and angry. She wanted everyone in the village to know the truth. She wanted to tell them that Mama Adana was not someone to fear. "Can I tell them?" she asked suddenly. "Can I tell everyone that you are not a witch?" The old woman looked at her gently. "If that is what your heart wants, then yes, my child. But remember, not everyone will believe you at first. Some people need time to open their eyes." "I don't mind," CHINAZA said. "I will tell them anyway. I will tell my grandmother first. She will listen." Mama Adana nodded approvingly. "Good. The truth is a seed. When you plant it in one heart, it can grow in many others." CHINAZA smiled. She liked the way Mama Adana spoke, simple but full of meaning. The firelight danced on their faces, and for a moment it felt as if the forest itself was listening to their conversation. Outside, the sound of rain began to fall softly on the roof. The drops made a gentle rhythm, and the air smelled fresh and cool. Mama Adana stood and brought out a small clay pot filled with soup. "You must eat something before you go," she said. "The road home is long." CHINAZA helped her set the table. They ate together, talking and laughing. The old woman told her stories about the old days, how the river used to overflow during the rainy season, how the first chief of Umuzi planted the great baobab tree at the center of the village, and how people once came together to sing under the moonlight. CHINAZA listened with delight. The stories felt like music, filling her with warmth and pride in her village's history. When the rain stopped, the sky outside had turned soft pink and orange. CHINAZA knew it was time to go. She stood up slowly, feeling both happy and sad. "Thank you, Mama, for telling me the truth," she said. "I will never forget what you said." Mama Adana reached out and touched her hand. "Thank you, my dear, for listening. That is something not everyone does." CHINAZA smiled. "I will come again soon. I want to hear more stories." The old woman chuckled. "I will be waiting, little one. There are many stories still left to tell." As CHINAZA stepped outside, the air was fresh and cool after the rain. The forest shimmered in the soft evening light. The trees looked brighter, the ground glistened with drops of water, and the smell of wet earth filled her nose. She turned back and waved. Mama Adana stood at the door, smiling, her gray hair glowing in the last light of day. CHINAZA began walking home, her heart full of hope. She held the pendant tightly in her hand and thought about everything she had learned. She couldn't wait to tell her grandmother the truth, that the woman everyone called a witch was really a kind healer who had once cared for them all. She imagined the surprise on her grandmother's face, and she smiled. As she walked through the trees, fireflies began to glow around her, lighting her path like tiny stars. She felt as if the forest was guiding her home, happy that its secret had finally been shared. For the first time, the woods did not feel mysterious or frightening. They felt alive, friendly, and full of truth. By the time CHINAZA reached the edge of the village, the moon had risen, round and bright in the sky. She stopped for a moment and looked back toward the forest. The morning sun rose slowly over the village of Umuzi, painting the sky with soft gold and pink colors. The birds were already singing, and children were running around, playing in the dust. In one small hut near the stream, CHINAZA sat beside her grandmother, Mama Kalechi. The golden pendant lay safely on the table, shining brightly in the sunlight. Mama Kalechi smiled each time she looked at it, but she was even more curious about what CHINAZA had told her the day before. "Child," she said, turning to her granddaughter, "are you sure it was Mama Adana who found my pendant?" "Yes, Grandma," CHINAZA replied eagerly. "She found it near the river and kept it safe. She said she wanted to return it to you herself." Mama Kalechi nodded slowly. "And you spoke with her? She did not harm you?" CHINAZA smiled. "No, Grandma. She was kind. She gave me water and food. She told me stories about the village from long ago. She is not a witch like everyone says. She was once the village healer." Mama Kalechi's eyes softened. "Ah, I remember those days," she said quietly. "She helped me when I was young. She made a medicine that saved my brother's life. But then, fear came and people changed." CHINAZA leaned forward. "Grandma, we must tell everyone the truth. Mama Adana is good. She has been living alone for too long. The people must know she still cares for the village." Mama Kalechi thought for a moment. She looked at her granddaughter's hopeful eyes and nodded. "You are right, my child. It is time for the truth to come back to Umuzi." That evening, when the sun was low and the villagers gathered near the big baobab tree, Mama Kalechi stood up. The people were talking, laughing, and sharing food. When they saw her rise, they became quiet. Everyone respected the old woman's words. "My people," she began, her voice clear and strong, "I have something to tell you. My pendant, which I thought I had lost, was found by Mama Adana." At the mention of the name, whispers spread through the crowd. Some people frowned, others looked uneasy. "Mama Adana," one man murmured. "That old witch in the forest?" Mama Kalechi raised her hand. "No," she said firmly. "She is not a witch. She is a kind and wise woman who once healed us. She found my pendant and kept it safe. She still remembers this village, and she still wishes us peace." The villagers looked surprised. They began to murmur again, unsure of what to believe. CHINAZA stepped forward, her heart pounding but her voice brave. "It's true," she said loudly. "I went to see her myself. She is gentle and kind. She told me stories about when the village was young. She still grows herbs and helps animals that are hurt. She even gave Grandma some medicine to help her sleep." The people turned to look at her. Some smiled at her courage. Others looked thoughtful. A few older villagers nodded slowly, remembering the past. An old man named Baba Obi stood up. He leaned on his walking stick and said, "When I was a boy, Mama Adana cured my mother's cough with her herbs. I had almost forgotten that. Maybe we were wrong to fear her." The crowd grew silent again. Mama Kalechi spoke softly. "People can make mistakes when they are afraid. But it is never too late to make peace." The chief of the village, who had been listening quietly, finally spoke. "If what you say is true," he said, "then we must go to her. We must see with our own eyes and thank her if she has helped us." The next morning, a small group of villagers walked toward the forest. The path was quiet, and sunlight slipped gently through the trees. CHINAZA walked beside her grandmother, holding her hand tightly. The people behind them carried baskets of fruit, yams, and gifts as a sign of peace. When they reached the small clearing, they saw the smoke rising from Mama Adana's hut. The cat sat near the door again, blinking lazily. CHINAZA smiled when she saw it. She walked forward and called softly, "Mama Adana, we are here." The door opened slowly, and the old woman appeared, just as calm and gentle as before. Her eyes widened when she saw the crowd of villagers behind CHINAZA. For a moment, she looked uncertain. "Mama," CHINAZA said cheerfully, "the people have come to thank you. They want to see you." Mama Adana's eyes filled with surprise and emotion. "To thank me," she repeated softly. Mama Kalechi stepped forward. "Yes, my sister," she said kindly. "You helped this village long ago, and you still help it today. We are sorry for the pain our fear caused you." The old woman's lips trembled. For many years, she had dreamed of hearing those words. She looked around at the faces, the men, women, and children who had once feared her. Now, they looked at her with warmth and curiosity, not hatred. "Please," the chief said, stepping forward, "come back to the village. We need your wisdom again. We have forgotten how to use the gifts of the forest." Mama Adana smiled gently. "Ah, my home is here among the trees, but I will visit. I will teach you once more, if your hearts are open." The people cheered softly. Some of the women came closer and hugged her. The children laughed and ran around the clearing. It was the first time in many years that laughter filled that part of the forest. That evening, the villagers sat together under the big baobab tree in the center of Umuzi. Mama Adana sat beside CHINAZA and Mama Kalechi. The air smelled of roasted maize and fresh fruit. The moon shone above them, bright and full. Mama Adana began to tell stories, old stories of the village, the river spirits, and the first farmers who had tamed the land. Her voice was soft but strong, and everyone listened quietly. CHINAZA sat at her feet, her eyes wide with wonder. The old woman spoke not like someone from the past, but like a voice of the earth itself, gentle, wise, and eternal. From that day on, things began to change in Umuzi. The forest was no longer a place of fear. People began to visit Mama Adana often. Mothers came to learn about healing herbs. Fathers came to ask about crops and soil. Children brought her flowers and sat around her to hear stories. The air between the village and the forest became full of peace and friendship. CHINAZA visited her every week. Together, they would sit under the great baobab tree near the river. Sometimes they would talk, sometimes they would simply listen to the birds and the sound of the water. Mama Adana taught CHINAZA how to grow herbs and how to understand the language of nature. CHINAZA listened carefully, knowing these lessons were precious. The villagers began calling Mama Adana by her old name again, the healer of Umuzi. They even built a small path from the village to her hut so she could visit easily. On market days, she would come and sell herbs and teas. People greeted her warmly and thanked her for her kindness. As time passed, CHINAZA grew older and wiser. She became known as the girl who brought peace to the forest. She never forgot that day she found her grandmother's pendant. It had led her to the truth, to kindness, and to friendship. One quiet evening, she and Mama Adana sat under the baobab tree. The sun was setting, and golden light filled the sky. The old woman smiled and said, "You see, my child, truth always finds its way home." CHINAZA nodded and smiled back. "Yes, Mama. And kindness always grows where truth is planted." The two sat there for a long time, watching the last light fade into the sky. Around them, the sounds of laughter floated from the village, and the forest hummed softly in peace.